My name's David Walker, currently the estimator for Sentinel Constructions. I look after all of the small works projects through to middle range projects that come in our door. Those projects require us to obviously go through a set of plans, documentation, to obviously work out a final price for the client. I've done estimating now for about 5 years and have a real passion for it. When we generally receive paperwork from a client or a project superintendent, in most cases there is an environmental aspect in those jobs. It's not always clear, it's not always easy to find that. Depends on the size of project that we receive, but if it's a larger project which is certainly ground up, there is a fairly large environmental requirement on those jobs. And not always is our environmental consideration well documented. Quite often it's very unclear. We don't necessarily know what is on the ground to start with. We quite often might get a soil report, but that soil report is basically done through 4 or 5 core holes. On that particular site we could have vegetation which is hazardous. We could also have on that site hazardous material which hasn't been considered. Could be buried in a back corner, we have no idea. And as an estimator we have to make some considerations where we think there's a contingency there, but we have to know what is on the site. That could be done via a site inspection, or as a rule of thumb we have to put a small margin on that. Environmental has become greater probably in the last sort of 3 years. Environmental has always been there, but has probably been more neglected. The advantage of the environmental stuff now is it's been driven from the top down. The top tier guys have become a lot more environmentally conscious, which then has a flow-on effect through the rest of the industry. The problem that we have in most cases is that project managers, client side, whether it be the client themselves, is generally looking to save cash through their tendering process, and we find that the level of documentation that comes through to us is not necessarily clear or exactly what they want. It comes through as a risk at the end of the day. The client's happy to push that environmental risk onto the subcontractor. So through the estimating process it's important that we get an understanding of what is on the site, what is required, what the government incentives are to make sure that we do the right thing, and government protocol of what is required, because the client, more often than not, doesn't tell us. I think the level of documentation does need to be improved, and in improving it has to come from, environmental consultants. And in most cases, environmental consultants aren't consulted, during the tender process. They might be involved further down the track, once the project is up and going, but if there was an environmental plan done fairly early on in the piece, where the subcontractors pricing the jobs, builders pricing the jobs, civil construction guys pricing the jobs, it would be done from the outset. Everyone would know what was there, everyone would know what the expectations are, and that would certainly make tendering fairer, but it also at the end of the day makes the job more environmental at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, if we don't allow for it, shortcuts get made. Stuff gets missed or stuff gets hidden because of it. I think government departments currently have cut environmental stuff to the bone. National parks, state forests, all that sort of stuff, most of the staffing has been reduced. There are more and more areas of the forests actually being locked up, not because they don't want people in there, it's because they don't have the staffing to ensure that these areas are open, clean, habitable, and being looked after. At the end of the day, the environment is there to protect, but it's also there for the people. We should be able to see these areas providing we provide minimal impact. To lock those areas off doesn't do anything for anyone. It doesn't create tourism. It actually doesn't look after the environment either, because no one goes in there, no one does weed eradication, no one does any of that sort of stuff. So the environment doesn't gain anything from it. All it does is lock areas up where people can't access them.